One thing that you may have found, and if you haven't, there is this. This is a video response to Joe Rogan from an archaeologist, and she talks specifically about what we have discussed today. The name of the channel is Dig It with Raven. What I found interesting, I think she did this live because there is a live chat replay. But what I found interesting about this response, it's not long, we can watch a little bit. But what I found interesting about this response is the fact that if you look at the comments, it's really split. You've got people that love her, and you've got people that absolutely hate her. And I kind of want to see what you guys think. I think she did a good job when it comes to the presentation of the facts. And yeah, it coincides with what I shared today. Because yeah, that is if you've ever looked into those helicopter stuff and you look for the evidence and what archaeology says, that's the information. Now you can choose to believe it or not, but at least of course it's important to look it up. I would love to have her as a guest at one point because I like how she gives you a little bit of an explanation of the situation, and she shows you the stuff. Look at this. Yeah, I think she does a good job. But some people didn't like the attitude, and I can understand that. It didn't bother me. But then I decided, but let me see if they changed. Let me see if they presented new evidence that I don't know about. Because again, I've addressed ancient Egypt. There was a time in my channel where I started producing a lot of videos, particularly when I was clashing with the Afrocentrist community when it comes to ancient Egypt. But the last time I did that was a year ago. So I'm like, maybe there is new information. And by the way, that's something you should always do. And so I found this video immediately and I watched it and I noticed that it's pretty much the same stuff. She didn't present anything new, but she did show a lot more pictures than I did. So I still think it's nice to watch it. Let's go.
I cannot believe that I'm about to do this. Hi everyone, welcome back to Dig It with Raven. Today we are doing something that I have sworn off for years, but the universe has pulled me right back into this path of madness, so I've just decided to face it head on.
Right.
Today we are debunking Joe Rogan and the helicopter hieroglyphs. So this week I was scrolling my YouTube homepage, as one does, and this clip from the Joe Rogan Experience came across my feed.
Yeah.
I normally ignore all this ancient aliens stuff, but for some reason I clicked it. It was, you know what, the thumbnail got me. That's what everyone wants to say. I wanted to hear what they were going to say about the supposed helicopter hieroglyphs at Abydos. And unsurprisingly, a bunch of claims were made without anyone doing any sort of research or just basic Googling. So here I am to help you all out.
Okay.
First off, hello Joe. My name is Raven and I am an archaeologist. My qualifications are, I have a bachelor in ancient Near Eastern civilizations where I learned to read hieroglyphs. Right here.
Right.
I also have 2 master's degrees that also focused on ancient Egyptian archaeology in some form or another, and I personally translated this tattoo on my arm. So I can read some hieroglyphs.
I saw people in the comments complaining about her presenting her qualifications as a flex. That's kind of silly. I mean, she's got to tell you why you should believe what she says. As long as people don't do it like, I have this qualification, so don't you dare have a different opinion. That's the part where it annoys me, but she's just presenting her qualifications. I don't have a problem with that.
I also wrote this book about lesser known ancient civilizations and cultures, but that's not relevant for today's video. Oh, and you might not have noticed, but
Shameless plug.
I did make a very brief cameo on your podcast episode with Flint Dibble. There I am. So without further ado, let's dig into the clip.
Wow. I know.
So what that means is that she was one of the experts that Flint Dibble contacted when he was preparing for his debate with Hancock.
That's what I wanted to go see. But the cool thing was the first temple I went in was what I'd seen on Ancient Aliens, where at the very top of the temple, you have one of the most famous hieroglyphs, which has a spaceship.
He's going to show the helicopter, the other thing. We'll watch it later. Let's see how she responds.
Yeah, that was the first
if
place
it's
I
not a helicopter, what a goddamn
What is it?
coincidence.
Yeah.
Okay, so right off the bat, these gentlemen are talking about a segment of hieroglyphs in the Temple of Seti I at Abydos, which is one of the oldest cities of ancient Egypt. Abydos is also extremely important to archaeologists today because it's home to many temples and multiple royal necropoli, such as el-Kab, which is a vital source of information for early pharaohs of Egypt, and it also gives us the earliest evidence of writing that we have in ancient Egypt. So it's a literal treasure trove archaeologically for the history of ancient Egypt and the development of the entire civilization. The temple of Seti I, where these helicopter hieroglyphs are found, also contains an inscription known as the Abydos King List, which provides Egyptologists with
look at this. Hoo-hoo, that's a lot of work right there. Shame that the pigments are gone here. Did you know that unfortunately, a lot of these images and paintings and murals, when they were found, a lot of these were found in the early 19th century. When you read the reports, and I read the letters just a couple of days ago as I was preparing for the stream, they say that the colors were as fresh as when they were painted. Unfortunately, however, as they are opened and oxygen enters, and then they start to get manipulated and touched and all of that kind of stuff and gessoed and all the situation that we can talk about what happens oftentimes, then they actually started deteriorating extremely quickly. When you look at this, you think, well, it looks like this because it's thousands of years old, so of course over the period of time. But if you read the reports, this level of deterioration actually happened in the last 2 centuries. Not always the case. But I've read reports specifically when it comes to this and the tomb, even more so, that when they opened the tomb for the first time, the tomb of Seti I, the colors were vivid.
Order of the Old Kingdom kings, and is the sole source that we currently have for the names of many of the kings of the 7th and 8th dynasties. And just so we're all on the same page, Seti I was the second pharaoh of the 19th dynasty during ancient Egypt's New Kingdom. He ruled from around 12...
Did you notice that you can see the hieroglyphs are in full color? And here you still see the remains of the pigments, because when we imagine the hieroglyphs, we imagine them often like this. And then in video games and in the movies, often you see that the hieroglyphs, even though it is set in the periods that, like for instance, the New Kingdom in this case, they are always like this, bare of color. But then when you look at it, it's another one of those situations where there is polychromy in the ancient period. And it makes sense because it matches the polychromy that you have also in the classical antiquity in the Mediterranean world. Egypt is on the Mediterranean. So everything was so colorful, whether it be the Romans, whether it be the Greeks, whether it be the Egyptians, everything was bathed in multiple colors. And of course, blue being, the Egyptians were famous for their blue. So were the Greeks, by the way, before anyone tries to present again the nonsense idea where the Greeks couldn't see blue, which is insane, that the BBC as well were pushing that nonsense. The Greeks produced their own type of blue, but they also imported blue. And then the Romans had specific dyeing factories all over Italy where they were producing colors, including some types of blue, but the Egyptians could produce a specific hue that they had mastered the production of, and that we can see here. So yeah, the colors, you can still see them, and I think it's absolutely phenomenal. Now, are these now, as we look at them in this very moment, are these an exact representation one-to-one to how the colors looked back in period? According to the researchers at the University of Florence, no. And I'll tell you how they have changed as we continue this live stream.
1294 or 1290 BCE, all the way until 1279 BCE. Seti I essentially restored the Egyptian Empire after it had been greatly diminished during the reign of Akhenaten, who was the pharaoh who converted the state to monotheism, and he was also the father of King Tutankhamun. Seti I, on the other hand, was the father of Ramses II, otherwise known as Ramses the Great. But let's get back to the Temple of Seti I, which is also known today as the Great Temple of Abydos. Construction on the temple was started in the 13th century BCE by Seti I, but it wasn't complete.
I know that some of you are triggered by the usage of BCE. I don't see the needs for it. I've even made a video about it where I have committed for the rest of my life to use BC AD. And in fact, when on my tomb, on my grave, I want them to write, he was born in AD 1982 and he died in AD. I want AD Anno Domini Nostri Jesu Christi written on that freaking grave, but that's beyond the point. I'm a freedom guy. If you like BCE CE, be my guest. Write it all over your walls. I refuse to do it, though.
Completed by the time he died. So it was finished and also renovated by his son, Ramses II. We have evidence that Ramses II changed its original design and placed new inscriptions within the temple.
That's it.
Which brings me to the oh-so-famous hieroglyphs at hand. Let's look at them a little bit more closely, shall we? From top to bottom, it's been noted that this looks like a helicopter.
Which it does.
This could be a submarine or a tank or sometimes a yacht.
Ooh, I did not remember that she said tank as well. Yeah, okay, we are in agreement. That's a flying tank. Love that. I mean, look, you can even see a little bit of the arm. I'm being sarcastic before people clip it, but I'm saying you can even see at the front, you've got a little bit of armor. This is part of an armored unit. That's my take.
This one supposedly is a spaceship or also a submarine, depending on which interpretation you look at. And the one at the bottom is a glider of symbols and concocted theories of alien contact or advanced technology that is now lost to time.
Right.
Or my favorite is being covered up by modern archaeologists, because we certainly get paid enough to cover things up. If only. And sure, you know, when I was a kid and this sort of stuff would come up on the History Channel, I ate it up. Mostly because it was one of the only sources of ancient Egyptian history content that I had at the time, but also because, yeah, it's pretty fantastical. But when you actually start studying this sort of stuff, you quickly move on from the fantastical to the much more reasonable conclusions that are based on fact.
What do you mean fantastical, Doctor? Bow down to your reptilian overlords.
I had to do it.
So I'm sorry to say to everyone watching that, no, these hieroglyphs are not evidence of advanced ancient technology or aliens. They are, in fact, an early case of whiteout, otherwise known as a palimpsest when it's referring to a similar act in a manuscript where the text has been scraped or washed off in preparation for new text to be written over top. This relief isn't one original set of carvings. It's actually two overlapping inscriptions of the official kingly titles of Ramses II and Seti I. When Ramses II was renovating the temple.
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, you did see, it's not like she needed to pull this one out, the Zaki Hawass book. This was actually, we Googled it, we only wrote it once, and we found it. I already knew it was there, but I kind of wanted to show you this. I just wrote it, hieroglyphs, helicopters. I scrolled twice, and we got into this. We found it immediately. So it was very easy to find. And I think it's important, particularly, and I do understand why she called it a debunking of Joe Rogan. To be fair to the guy, Joe Rogan didn't say, oh, these are absolutely, his guest was more onto the, yeah, these are aliens type of thing. But he kind of said, what a coincidence, which it is. He did say, wow, does look like a helicopter, which I agree. It does look like a freaking helicopter. But he didn't kind of push it to be like, this is what it is, guys. They're covering it up. I watched the thing. He doesn't say that. However, I do also understand her frustration a little bit, because basically what she's saying is that perhaps when you have 20 million subscribers, in preparation to the episode, all you really needed to do is to Google this for literally 2 minutes, look at this, and at least present it as an alternative explanation. Because, yeah, if you say, looks like a helicopter, and your guest goes like, yeah, because of course the guest likes it very much, and then you don't say anything else, the masses are exposed to this, but they don't see this. Right? So I do understand where she's coming from when it comes to that. Once again, I wouldn't call it a debunking of Joe Rogan because it's not like he said it, but I do understand that she's saying this because really he could have showed at least both sides. And I'm always into show both sides and let people use their own critical thinking and decide what they want to decide, because yeah, that's freedom. That is freedom.
Of the official kingly titles of Ramses II and Seti I.
Yeah.
When Ramses II was renovating the temple of Seti I, he had someone cover up Seti I's royal titulary and replace it with his own.
Not nice.
This is actually very common in ancient Egypt for people taking credit for things that other people might have done, or even trying to erase people from history. But then, over time, as some of the plaster eroded and fell away, it created a weird combo of signs that now look like these modern vehicles. So yes, Mr. Rogan, it is a goddamn coincidence.
At least I appreciate that she does admit that they do look like that, which they do.
Let's look at what each carving would have said when it was fresh. The initial inscription made during the reign of Seti I would look like this and translate to powerful...
Man, that looks like a bow. That looks like a bow. And then this is the tank. The tank is still there. Miss Raven, the tank is still there. And then we've got the UAP.
Scimitar, who suppresses the 9 bows.
It is a bow,
which is
yeah.
their way of saying the enemies of Egypt. Menma'atra, which is the throne name of Seti I.
Yeah.
Next, Ramses II, son of Seti I, filled that in and recarved it with his 2 ladies' name.
Yeah, so you can see how you're adding this, and now it looks like there is the kind of what do you call the tail end that is connected to a fuselage on a flying vehicle. That's basically part of the second inscription, and then that's be added to this. And then, yeah, this part, as we said, it only adds the little spoiler. And yeah, what is the helicopter? So yeah, this is the section that would add, once again, man, what is it with Ramses adding tail ends of vehicles? Can we tell him to stop? Ramses, what are you doing? You're spoiling it. You're revealing it.
Protector of Egypt, who repels foreign lands. Usur Ma'atra Setepenre, which is the throne name for Ramses II.
That sounded very Anglophone.
Egyptian rulers had 5 official royal names in their title,
Yeah.
so one can see why you would need to reuse the space, because it would take up a lot of room.
Not to mention, Ramses could have said, spoiler alert, at least.
This segment that we just read out are the 2 ladies' names for each of the pharaohs, respectively. The 2 ladies are the goddesses Wadjet and Nekbet, who were the protectors of unified
Oh,
Egypt.
yeah, the ones that you find, yeah, I remember that.
And were responsible for
The mask.
establishing the laws, protecting rulers and the Egyptian countryside, and promoting peace. You can see them together on the crowns of ancient Egypt, and the 2 ladies, or Nebti name.
Can we take a moment to appreciate how beautiful blue and gold as a combination is? We don't see it very often. It's beautiful. Blue and gold. I'm considering, what could I do? What could I make in blue and gold in here? I don't know, but I'm starting to consider it. Goodness gracious, it looks good.
Name is one of the oldest royal titles in ancient Egyptian history. So there you have it. No mass conspiracy, just damaged walls and age. Just look at the state of the ceiling right above it. It's...
Yeah, look at the ceiling. That's actually, I appreciate this. You see, what she could have done is that she could have told you, that's how it is, bye. You gotta believe me because I got the titles. Instead, she's actually showing you a better image so that people can look at this and be like, well, to be fair, this is collapsing. And then this piece of the cartouche is completely gone. So I can start to see even the bottom has been completely chipped. You can see this. And then we've got a little spacecraft. I can see that there isn't basically anything left when it comes to the second plastering. Be nice if some of this plastering was at the bottom, but I appreciate this.
absolutely no wonder that the plaster fell off with all of that crumbling stone. If you still don't believe me, all you have to do is just shift your gaze a little to the left
Yeah.
to see the cartouche, which has very obvious signs of carved glyphs over top of one another.
I wish you would have pointed it out, because this is a little bit of a teaching problem. You should never take for granted that people know, like, she said it's very evident that there is, what did she say again?
Don't believe me? All you have to do is just shift your gaze a little to the left to see the cartouche, which has very obvious signs of carved glyphs over top
Very obvious signs of carved glyphs over the top
of one another.
of one another. It would have been nice if you could, in fact, if you watch this, Professor, if you could point these out to us, because I am not familiar with these symbols at all. In fact, whenever I work on anything Egypt related, I ask the Egyptologist from Rome, that is one of the members of my team, because I'm not able of reading hieroglyphs, since you are. And it would be nice if you could provide maybe a screenshot where you write for me, oh, this is one part, like this piece belongs to one set of inscription, but the circle, for instance, is part of the secondary that was added later. Because to me, it's not obvious. I'm glad it's obvious to you, Southern Eastern. I don't know if you're joking, but to me, this isn't as obvious. I can see, though, that there is some plaster gone. I guess this is what it is, the white here, but or maybe this piece, this section here. Clearly, this is one symbol, because it's a, what is it, a wasp? Be nice if she could point it, spell it out.
Also, very quickly, while I have you all here, Joe and Aaron talked about the supposed
the
wooden
plane.
that was found, quote, in one of the chambers.
You know, there's a bunch of weird stuff.
Skipping it.
chambers you are speaking of, but I believe that you, Joe, are talking about the Saqqara bird.
There we go.
This lovely little bird, modeled after a falcon, is
So
made...
when you look at this and people think that it could be a model for a plane, once again, if they modeled this after a plane because either they had planes or the aliens had planes, then my question is, why are you making it of wood? Unless it's like a toy. But, you know, if they were this advanced, then I would expect us to find it made of plastic or metal. But whatever, it's a toy, at least the way I understand it. When you look at it from the side, you see the little eye and you can recognize the beak. Yeah, that's a bird. But when you look at it from the top, it actually does look like a plane. And then there is something that's to do with the tail that I'm going to present in a second. Let's see. I don't remember if she addresses that. Let's have a look.
Made out of sycamore wood and was mounted onto a stick. It was discovered in 1898 during excavations at Saqqara in the tomb of Pa-di-Iman and dates to around 200 BCE. We don't know what the Saqqara bird's official purpose was. It could have been a ceremonial object because falcons were representations for particular ancient Egyptian deities like Horus, but it could have also been a toy or even a masthead on a sacred boat for a religious festival.
For me, it's a toy. Also because when archaeologists say that it's ceremonial, it's archaeologist speech to mean we don't know what it was used for. Just so you know. Every time you hear an archaeologist, and at this point some historians too, they tell you, and these bracelets that were ceremonial, and this helmet that is particularly big, ceremonial, and this sword that is different from usual, it's a little heavier, ceremonial. Ceremonial just means we haven't got a clue what that means, because we haven't found inscriptions, we haven't found literary sources, we haven't found evidence, stelae, murals, inscriptions, nothing like that. No one tells us, we don't know. Ceremonial sounds better than saying we don't know. Just so we're clear on how ceremonial works when it comes to these things. That's why I'm usually that annoys the heck out of me. Nothing against that, of course, but I know it's used. And then when archaeologists say copper alloy, it pisses me off because I'm like, could you tell me if it's bronze, if it's tin bronze, if it's arsenical bronze, if it's freaking brass or orichalcum? Could you tell me what it is? No, they have to say copper alloy, and then you told me nothing at that point. Yeah, I understand copper is in there and there is something else, but if I don't know what the constituents are, I know nothing about that object. So there is that. Anyways, yeah, let's have a look at this falcon, I think she said.
Some people have seen this bird and suggested that the ancient Egyptians had knowledge of aerodynamics, which would place the scientific development of these principles centuries earlier in the historical timeline. This is yet another object that people use to claim that ancient Egypt developed the first aircraft. Sorry to burst your...
Yeah, I mean, knowledge of aerodynamics because you are representing a bird in wood doesn't make sense. We have seen birds since, like, literally the birth of mankind. In fact, how many of us have wished we were birds? I think this is something we could... If prehistoric people could write, which would make them historical, but if prehistoric people could write, I think that that's something we would have found, either in poetry or just regular imagination. I can just imagine Paleolithic children pretending to be birds. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they had knowledge of aerodynamic in the modern sense, in the engineering sense. So yeah, I agree with her with that.
Your bubble yet again, but there is no evidence of this, and this little guy isn't even capable of flight. It's just too heavy and unstable. Researchers at the Institute of Aerospace Technology, Bremen, conducted a computational fluid dynamics simulation based on a 3D scan of the bird back in 2023. And the results showed that the bird demonstrates, quote, no ancient knowledge of aerodynamics. Its glide properties aren't sufficient, the center of mass is off, and the lift distribution across the wings means it would just roll uncontrollably. Though I do have to admit that, yes, looking at the Saqqara bird from above, it very much does look like a plane.
You know, it reminds me, yeah. You know what it reminds me of? The old school planes from World War One. That's what it reminds me of, doesn't it?
But, in my opinion, so would many other basic carvings of birds. So there you have it.
Okay. Well, the only thing that she didn't mention it, so the only thing I can see that we would have to address is why they gave it this kind of ending. Because, I mean, I haven't seen a single bird with a vertical looking, although then again, when you look at it from this side, it looks less like a plane. If you look at it from this side, it looked more like a plane, the end tail of a plane. But yeah, when you look at it from the side, it looks more like a fish. Well, I guess, I mean, maybe you wanted people to be able to hold it. That could be out. Maybe it's a grip, like for a child, so the child can go like this. Maybe. I mean, that would make sense. Definitely makes more sense than thinking that this is a plane from World War One. So that's my take on it. That's why I think this is like this. That's what I'm saying. That's my take. It's my take. You say it's a segnavento, maybe. So like to see the wind direction, maybe. But I don't know if it would move. It depends how heavy it is. We would have to look at the specs for that. I do think it's probably a toy. Yeah, I think it's a toy. You know how many toys the Romans had and even bought or produced in wood and other materials, and then even bronze, and then they brought them back to their kids when they did have kids. And in general, the population, yeah, toys been around for a while. It's a flying fish. Oh, okay, it's basically that's Super Mario. But yeah, no. Anyways, I did like the video. I do want to show you, however. Let me see the very ending.
These reaction debunking videos, let me know in the comment. Big thank you to all of my patrons over on Patreon. If you like the channel, you want to help support the channel.
Yeah, she's got a Patreon. Since we did watch her video, let me see if she has it linked as a professional courtesy. I'm just going to show her Patreon now, since, I mean, I did make content thanks to her. And she's got 100 members. And then, yeah, you can join. This is her Patreon and what it looks like. Very nice. Thank you for that, Professor.